What if the Subculture palette from Anastasia Beverly Hills launched in 2023? Let's talk about it. This is by far one of my most favorite color stories, I think, of all time. It just lives in my head rent-free. I think it was so unique for its time, and I think this color story still holds up in 2023. That being said, I think there's a couple of things I would remove for 2023 as well as add, especially when it comes to, or more specifically when it comes to the shimmer shadows. I do feel like I never really loved, for example, Cube. It like hard pan immediately. It wasn't the greatest. Electric was pretty nice, and then Adorn I just feel like is a little lackluster in here. So I feel like that is something I'm really mostly going to be focusing on because I feel like the matte selection is pretty close to perfection. I am a little bit more limited on the single matte eyeshadows I have versus the single shimmer shadows I have. So keeping that in mind, I might not be able to match these tones completely. I already picked out a bunch of them that I do have. So we're going to go through and I'm going to kind of pick and choose. I am also going to be making this palette smaller. So I'm actually going to be removing 4 of the pans because I do want to fit it into this empty palette. This is from the ColourPop Roaring Hearts palette. Shout out to BizRevolta on Instagram and Glam. They use this empty palette for BYOPs all the time. I will link down their Instagrams below. Definitely check them out if you want to see some beautiful custom eyeshadow palettes. So this is only a 12 pan, and I do feel like, honestly, I didn't think it needed to be this many shades. I definitely felt like, for example, Dawn doesn't need to be there, Adorn doesn't need to be there, though I will be switching probably that out just for a shimmer instead. So I tried my best pulling out mattes that I thought were kind of close to some of these tones, and then I think as I go I'm gonna decide on which ones I don't really feel like I need. So I'm gonna go kind of down the line a little bit. First up is the shade Dawn, and this is just like a lighter, very neutral beige. I pulled the shade 90 from Burnovich and Spacewalker from Terra Moons. Honestly, this is one of the shades I feel like this palette could have done without, even though I do think that it is nice to have this kind of just more neutral shade to help blend some of these tones out, but I am not going to be actually picking any of these since I am cutting 4. Next to that is Destiny. Love the tone of this one. Super grungy, grassy, like washed out green. And I pulled the shade Freya from Devinah Cosmetics. Sade from Devinah Cosmetics. This one's definitely way more green. Then this green shade is from one of the Shroud Cosmetics palettes. I forget which one, but if we pick it out, I will put it up on the screen. And I think this one is way too grassy green. And then I also pulled this shade, which is from the Bella Beaute Bar and Ellie Star and Brittany Huffman collab. So there's no name on this one, but it is from that large palette. So looking at all of these tones now, I think I'm going to cut out these two, the last two, as an option. I just think that they're too green for this color story, and I do prefer the more muddy kind of tone. So I think I'm going to pull aside. Actually, I kind of feel like almost this one might be nicest because it's kind of like replacing essentially Destiny and Dawn, since I did take out Dawn. So actually I think I'm just gonna pull both of them as an option, and I'm just gonna leave them out, and then we'll kind of decide as the color, as everything comes together. Next up is the shade All Star, which is a really beautiful kind of mauve-y red, wine red, kind of burnt red. For that one I pulled Desma from Devinah Cosmetics. I feel like this one's kind of pretty close. I think it's a little bit, the tone is a little bit less warm. And then also Nemesis from Devinah. Oh my gosh, look at how beautifully this one swatches. This one is more brown. I also pulled out 127 from Burnovich. This shade from, again, the Bella Beaute Bar palette with the collab. I feel like actually this one might go better against Rowdy, but it is a little bit lighter. And Cepheus from Terra Moons. This one is way too red. So definitely not that one. I don't think that one either. So I think I'm going to opt in for this Devinah shade. I believe that was Nemesis. The next shade is Mercury. This is such an interesting grayish brown, essentially. Love this shade. I pulled 112 from Burnovich. Oh, that's a lot more powdery than I thought. That picked up super powdery. And that one is pretty spot on. I mean, I feel like that's the one. And then Adorn from Devinah. So it's got a little bit more plum to it. This next shade is from the Bella Beaute Bar collab palette. This one is darker, I think, but it is pretty similar. And then I also pulled Suki from Devinah, but this one is way more purpley and lighter. So I think we've got a winner with the Burnovich shade. Next up is Roxy, and the only shade I have to compare to that is Burnovich 139. And I know it's way too orangey, but I actually really like that as an option, so I'm going to pull that one. Then I'm skipping over Electric and moving on to Fudge. I'm going to put that one right here. And then I pulled the Burnovich shade 196 for that. Again, a little bit warmer, a little bit darker, but it is my only option. New Wave, I love the shade in here. I think it is a very vital shade in this palette. I pulled Amber Dusk from Terra Moons, which is definitely brighter and lighter. And Iduna from Devinah. This one's not really swatching great, but I think this one is definitely closer. If anything, it is a little bit more orangey, but that's not really a bad thing. For Untamed, I only do have 2 shades. Here's Untamed. This one is from the Brittany, Huffman, and Ellie and Bella Beaute Best Mattes palette. Definitely more grassy and less teal, but it is unfortunately my only option. And then the next one is Kadra from Devinah. Love this one. Such a pretty shade. I do wish the shade was closer, but I'm going to pull that one. Next up is Edge. This one, again, another very vital tone. It's like a very mustardy yellow. I got Capella from Terra Moons. Very powdery. This one is much, much brighter, not really orange either. And then shade from the Best Mattes. This one's not really close, so I feel like it's a mixture between these two, but I'm just gonna pull this one because I do feel like it goes along with the color story a bit better than the brighter shade. I just realized I skipped over Axis for some reason. I think maybe because I don't have a lot of shades, but I'm gonna come back to that one. We're gonna get into Rowdy first. This one is such a beautiful tone, very, very unique. I feel like you don't really see this kind of tone very often in palettes. This shade is from the Best Mattes palette. I don't know why it's not really swatching nicely. This one is lighter and plummier. Burnovich N10, which is way too light and bright, I think, for this selection. And then I also have Atrina from Devinah. Might be the closest, actually. And Rigel from Devinah. This one is really, really cool. Hopefully it doesn't belong in this palette. And then the last shade I pulled is actually from one of the Shroud palettes. I think it's from the Betty Bean collection, the second one. And I pulled this one because I thought maybe this one might be like an interesting replacement to kind of switch it up a little bit. So I think I'm going to pull aside these 2 from the palette. I do feel like I want like another deeper shade. Watching Axis, since I forgot about this one. This is such an interesting tone, and I don't have anything quite like this, at least from my round pan mattes. I might have something similar from Lethal Cosmetics. I think this is again from one of these Shroud palettes. I should have just kept them out so I would know. I also have Arabian Nights from Terra Moons. That one is way too blue. And then Royal from Terra Moons. And I'm not even going to swatch this one because I don't think it actually belongs in here. So I am going to pull this one aside. This is 10 shades, and I really would like at least 3 shimmers to put in here. So I do want to eliminate 1. And I'm kind of honestly thinking of eliminating this one because I feel like what really makes this color story so special are like these grungy tones from the other shadows. And I don't feel like this is like a crucial shade that really makes this palette like what it is. So I'm going to pull this one aside and gotta cut that one out, which leaves now 3 slots opened up for some shimmer shades. And I'm also going to decide to remove this one and go with this shade for replacement for Rowdy. And then for this one, I'm still like a little torn because I kind of feel like I'm gravitating right now towards this one, but I think I want to pick out the shimmers and then make the final decision then. So let's get into the shimmers. I have pulled way too many that I want to include in here, so it's going to be really hard to narrow down. So I've pulled quite a bit of shimmers. So these are holochromes from Touch of Glam Beauty. These 4 are from ShineBySD. There's some other single shadows I just pulled out here. And then all these are Luxie shades, which they just have a lot of good grungy shades. So there's quite a bit, and I only have 3 slots open. I might try to open up a 4th one. We'll have to see. I definitely know I want to include Fairy Fire from Devinah Cosmetics. This shade just has all the different tones that I think are going to pair so nicely with a lot of the shades in the palette. So I am picking that one out. I actually feel like that one probably would replace Electric. Next I have Radar, and I feel like the shade would be so cool in here instead of Cube, because I feel like it's essentially what Cube is, kind of like a wannabe. But I mean, look at the difference. It's actually more pinky, so I feel like this one would actually go a little bit better. So this one is a very strong contender, so I'm going to put that one aside. The other one I really thought I wanted was something grungy, like one of these kinds of shades. This one is Capella from It's Belle Cosmetics, and this is such an underrated shade, honestly. And then this one is Dry River Bed, I believe, from Shellwe Cosmetics, that I actually want to go with something a little bit more opaque, because I already pulled a shade that was kind of more sheer and iridescent. So I'm kind of gravitating pulling this one aside more so, even though this one will be still pretty cool. Also thought maybe this one will be interesting in here, because it is just fall in an eyeshadow essentially. This one is Gladiator from ShineBySD, and it is so shiny, so shiny. I feel like this one would be interesting to add kind of more depth in the sense of shimmers in the palette, but I am definitely much more of a kind of layerable multi-chrome era, so I kind of feel like that might be more fun, because there are so many kind of mid-tone to deeper shades in the mattes that I feel like this one might just be a little too much. So I think I'm going to put that one aside, because I'm not going to pick that one. And then I pulled also Zigzag, because a beautiful base to it with a green reflect that I thought would be really fun. But I do think we already have the green reflect from Fairy Fire. Actually, let me swatch them kind of next to each other. So I don't want to run the risk of having these end up looking a little bit similar just purely because they flash green. So I'm going to put that one aside, because I really want Fairy Fire in here. Okay, so this is good. We're narrowing it down a little bit. I kind of want like a really punchy, special, neutral shade, just to kind of even it out a little bit, because we have so many like grungy tones. So maybe like a grungy shimmer almost. This one actually right here might be interesting also, because not only is it a multi-chrome, but it's also a holochrome, and it kind of flashes similarly to Cube, which would be an interesting kind of replacement, like a 2023 version of that. And then let's see actually Radar. So Radar is more orangey versus pinky. Also, Honey Hollow is such a beautiful neutral holographic shifty special shade that I think might be really fun in here. And it does have a little bit of pinkiness to it. So actually let me swatch that one, and then let me swatch this one from earlier. I feel like they're pretty similar. This one flashes to a green, while this one flashes to a blue. That's a hard one. I don't really have any, I have that blue that's for Axis, so maybe that one would be fun, like playing off of that, because I feel like there's plenty of green flashes we can get with some of these other shades. So I'm going to go with that one, and that one was called Venom Hollow, and it's going to be a replacement for Cube. So really only have one more slot open. I'm going to put these away. Ooh, actually now I'm thinking maybe this one would be interesting. Ooh, that one would be really fun in here. Let me pull this one aside. I feel like I just need to kind of see the whole color story and then just kind of swatch some of these next to the mattes. I really feel like any of these would be great for this palette. This one is definitely the most neutral one out of them. Let me just swatch it like right here. So beautiful, so smooth, and very wet looking. That is the shade Moonbeam from ShineBySD, from one of their semi-recent collections. I haven't done a video on these, but I do plan on it because they are so beautiful. And then also this shade is speaking to me because it has just like a lot of grunginess going on. So I don't know, I'm really torn. I feel like it'd be nice to have like and it has a little bit of taupiness to it, which is really interesting. So I'm going to pull this one aside. And this one is called Garden Glow. Okay, here are some Luxie shades. I'm not sure. I feel like I already have a really good bunch of shades that I pulled that I'm like kind of stuck in between. So I'm not really sure if I feel like pulling any more, because I do think some of these kind of get close to this kind of category anyway, especially these over here. So I think I'm actually going to, I mean, a green would be fun as like a little pop, but I feel like it's too bright. I want to keep this like super, super grungy. So I'm going to put this one aside and we're just going to get into what I pulled so far. I feel like looking at this now, the blue just really doesn't fit in here. And I think these two, even if I switch this one out, are just too similar. But I really want something that is kind of along the lines of Axis in here because I feel like this is then the only deepest shade. So I'm going to eliminate the shade for Destiny and then I'm going to kind of spread them out because I do want to interject kind of between some of these shades, the shimmers. I do need to add another one on the bottom. So I'm going to kind of bookend it, I think, with these shades and then I'll bring kind of one in the middle. Or kind of maybe alternate them or something like that. We'll see. So here is Fairy Fire. I think I'm going to put this one right in the very first slot. And then I think I want to switch these two out actually. I kind of like this one up here though. I really feel like this one would be nice in there. So I'm going to add that one in there. And then I have 2 more slots left. Do I actually want to switch this one out for, actually, okay, let me do that. I'm going to put this one here. I'm going to put this one next to that. So that's like almost kind of like a little quad situation. Actually, this would be like a perfect quad right there. Or actually this, but I want to kind of keep it. I feel like the green up here is nice. So maybe leave the taupe down. And I'm going to put the shimmer here. Move this one over. I'm going to go with this one and I'm going to put it above the taupe. Bringing this one up and putting Fairy Fire here. I don't know. I feel like Fairy Fire should be kind of like, yeah. I think that's pretty good right here. So let's put it into the empty palette. So I completely miscounted. I thought this was 6 pans each. So I have to cut 2 shades. I have no idea which ones. I think I'm going to cut this one and the hollow. So that will leave 3 shimmer shadows, which is fine. I'm going to put Fairy Fire up here as it belongs. And then the orange here, the green here. I'm going to put the taupe back up there. I feel like it's nice when it's up there. And then I think I'm going to put the taupe here. And then I really want to kind of switch this one out actually. So I'm going to put this one kind of next to this one. And then this one up here. What do we think? I feel like it's too many mattes. I kind of want like one more shimmer, but then it's going to make all of this uneven. Decisions. Or maybe I feel like this bottom row needs to get broken up. Just feel like I think that's good. Okay, I think that's what I needed. So here is the Subculture 2023 versions. What do you think? Let's swatch this out. And then I'm also going to be swatching out the Subculture palette and we're gonna take a little peek-see at both of them. I'm not loving this one in here, honestly. I just feel like the tones of it don't really jive with either of these tones. So I think I'm gonna switch this one out. So I switched it out for the shade Gladiator from ShineBySD. I just feel like it might be nice with some of the deeper tones in here. And also it kind of flashes this kind of tone straight on. And then it has a lot of mustardy orangey goodness in there. So it kind of plays off of these 2 shades as well. So here is my 2023 version. And here is the original Subculture. So I completely forgot to film an outro, but here they are next to each other. I definitely wish I had something much closer to Axis because I do feel like the blue is just not the same. I do think Axis is such a vital tone in here in this palette that really makes it such a special palette, especially next to the rest of the tones. So let me know in the comments below, what do you think of the 2023 version of the Subculture palette? And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you next time.